Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, here again with Jeremy Lee of Sports Cards Live. We're doing a dueling questions format where Jeremy gets to ask me a question and then we'll go back and forth until we don't run out of time, because we could keep going for a long time, I'm sure. I've seen Jeremy's endurance on his show, so I'm pretty sure I'm not going to outlast him, but we may have a buzzer beater or two. So thanks, Topps Panini Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins and Scott Auctions, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike's Stadium Sports Cards, as well as ComC.com and Beckett.com, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So, Jeremy, I've listened to some of your episodes. You've listened to some of mine. You're familiar with the dueling questions format. The listeners, I can assure you that I am nervous, having seen Jeremy in action on his YouTube, where he could take these questions out and take them in rapid fire. So, you get the first shot.
All right.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be back. This is like a dream come true for me to be sitting here talking to you. So I have my first question teed up. Are you ready for it?
I hope so.
Okay, so my first question, Jim, is you sold Beckett, your business, a few years ago or several years ago. And my question is, when you sold the company, what sort of due diligence did you do into the buyer? And by that, I mean, was it like giving up a child for adoption sort of thing? How interested were you in making sure that it ended up in hands that you were confident would be able to carry on the name and the company to the level of integrity that you had during your tenure at the helm?
I've got to give a politically correct answer here, Jeremy. A tough question, but if I go back, it was actually more than 15 years ago. It's been 15 and a half years since I've sold to Apprise Media. But for many decades, I've met on a monthly basis with a group of other presidents and CEOs of companies. So I have some close friends of guys that have dealt with that crossroads of life where you're thinking about selling something that's got your name on it. And I went through that decision of thinking, I really want to find somebody who's really going to take good care of the brand and all that stuff. And they told me, they said, you're really going to have to sell to the highest bidder. And I said, I don't want to sell to the highest bidder. I want to sell to the one that, they said, well, if you find the nicest bidder, they're going to flip it to the highest bidder. So this is a concept not unknown in card circles of flipping companies. So they said, you just might as well. But what you're looking for, and we're going to try to screen it for you to get a company that's really good, that knows what they're doing, that really wants to preserve and protect what you've built. They don't want to tear it down. So I felt okay with who I sold it to, but 5 years later, it was resold. And my buddies had told me, you can control who you sell it to. You can't control what happens after that. And so I haven't been displeased, but each group has put their own stamp on it. So we're now dealing with the second owners, and they have a different way of doing business. And I still have a lot of friends that work there, but I'm not the boss anymore.
And the only reason I ask is sometimes you sell a card from your personal collection and you want to make sure it goes to a good collection or a good home. So I just wondered, as a collector, how you approach
the same thing, though. I mean, you could sell it to some nice guy, and that nice guy then flips it. So I hope that doesn't happen. I don't want to be too jaded, and that's really not what happened to me. Okay, my question for you, since you've had so many questions on your show, what's the worst question you've gotten from somebody that either made you cringe or left you speechless, or because you do a live show, I could at least edit out stuff if I had to, because I've actually had some slander on my show that I had to edit out, but you're live. So what's a terrible question from whatever perspective?
Well, the thing about my show is that I have a different guest on every episode. And one of the most important things to me is that my guests are comfortable during the episode. And I've had on guests who can be targets of criticism and complaining from the collector community. I've had owners and staff of card companies. I've had card grading company representatives on the show. And, they're often the target of people airing their, the biggest thing for me is I don't want my show to be a customer service department or to be a complaint department. So whenever I see a question that comes up in the comments towards my guest, and it might be, from, if it's a card company personnel, I don't want to ask the guest the question, well, why does my redemption take so long to get fulfilled? Or why is there a sticker auto in this case? My show is about bringing information to the hobby, not about collectors coming and complaining about things. And I've had that happen a few times. And I just try to not really address it, or I will address that viewer and I'll say, listen, this show is not about airing your complaints or specific cases of customer service. So let's just save that for you to email them, and let's continue on with the interesting content.
Fair enough. Your turn.
All right. My next question for you is, I remember growing up and waiting for the Beckett Hockey magazine to come out every single month. I could not wait for it. So at that time, it was my dream to work for a card company or Beckett Publications. My question is, could I have come down to your office? Could I have flown down to where you live, where the company was in Dallas? And could I have come down there and applied for a job? And would I maybe have gotten a job if I came to see you back then?
Well, from what I know of you, yeah, I mean, I don't think I suppose we did have people come in unsolicited and say, hey, I want to work. They did something, but most of the ones I heard about were doing something that I haven't heard you say. And that is, I had people knock on my door and say they would work for free. So I don't think you were going to fly down there and work for free. But if you have if you've got skills, because you're an accountant, and you have a little bit of an entrepreneurial itch, so you can see opportunity, you probably would have fit in really well. And you had a good collecting background from when you were a kid. But we had, and I've related this, Alan Muir we brought in from Canada, and we had a tough time getting approval to hire a Canadian. We had to go to bat for him legally with the immigration, which is very different. That was 30 years ago almost. But, it wasn't automatic to prove that he was the best person for the job, and he wasn't an American citizen. But that would have been great. And at the very least, we would have formed a relationship with you, and you would have been a regional correspondent or something like that, because we delighted in having sharp people out there that weren't necessarily full-time employees, but people that were sharp and we could trust. So good question. Okay, my question for you is, if Wayne Gretzky wanted to be a guest on your show for 5 minutes, what would you ask him about related to the hobby?
That's a great question. I would ask him, what does he think of all these cards that are sent to him to sign all the time? And does he understand really how much the collectors love these little 2.5 by 3.5 canvases with his picture on them and his autograph and memorabilia or whatever the card is? I often wonder that of all the players. Do they really appreciate and do they really understand how much how to the extent that we collectors really enjoy these objects that portray them? I want to get his insight into that. And, it does show through a little bit that he has a beautiful autograph. And a lot of the modern day players, their autographs almost tell you directly that they don't care at all about these cards. So I'd just like to hear his perspective on that.
I think his perspective recently has changed such that he has, let's see, about 1,845,000 reasons why collecting is cool now. And he needs to take seriously with a card business because of the LeBron James sale. So Gretzky is the king for hockey, I think, for me, of all the people I've ever seen. Okay, is it my turn? Your turn, because that was me asking about Gretzky. Thanks.
Thank you. And your question, actually, your response to my response actually is a great segue into my next question, which is, just current events. I'm curious as to your thoughts on the sale of the LeBron James rookie card that just sold a few days ago for $1.845 million. When you were publishing your magazines, did you ever think that we would see a modern day card sell for that kind of money?
If I say yes, I'm going to look stupid. I mean, who would think that? It's so outrageous and it's so over the top, and there's some good aspects about it, but like I was saying, there's going to be a ripple effect that players are going to think, wait a minute, why am I only that players and collectors and dealers all sometimes misunderstand the fact that Beckett Publications was tracking the secondary market, not the primary market. Now, Panini, in some of the things they're doing, Topps, Upper Deck, the market for unopened product can float a little bit, but the crazy gyrations are once the cards are opened. And now with that kind of a price that's getting that much publicity, my fear is the price of everybody's autograph is going to go up, which means the price of the products are going to go up. And I don't like that. I mean, I'd like to see an orderly increase in progression within the hobby, but it's like everything's doubled this year or more than doubled. And that's not healthy. I've mentioned that's kind of irrational exuberance instead of just regular rational exuberance. It's a great hobby. So I'm concerned about that, but there are many other cards to go for. If you're looking for a Grail card, that's one, but there are many others too. And there, again, like I said, when you go into other sports, the latest Connor McDavid sale was setting a record. So it's troubling and exciting at the same time.
Yeah, I agree.
My turn again?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is a tricky one. I didn't cue you on this, but if the Hockey Hall of Fame called you and said they're thinking about putting Brian Price in the Hockey Hall of Fame as a builder, as a contributor, what would you say?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, his history is storied in the hobby, but does building the hobby really count for building the sport itself? I don't know that in my mind, I see that direct link. That said, I do feel that collecting cards is a bigger part of my life than being a sports fan. And I am a sports fan. I'm a hockey fan. I'm a fan of all sports, but I'm certainly a hockey fan first and foremost. So selfishly and, almost just, based on my life and how I see the whole world of sport and hockey and collecting, I would probably say yes, because he brought the Parkhurst brand back, which was something that we hadn't seen since the early 60s, which predates me. And then, his story goes through working with all these different card companies, whether it was ProSet or Donruss or Upper Deck. And then he created his In the Game brand. And then he did a whole bunch of other little projects along the way. Now he's got President's Choice trading cards. I would say, you know what? I would probably say yes. I think he would deserve to go in there, but as a builder and almost a subcategory of the builders.
He's a legitimate builder or contributor. He was, yeah. Okay. So we're kind of on the same page there. I think that's good. Your turn.
Okay.
Now that Brian has been inducted.
Congratulations, Dr. Brian Price.
First dentist in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. My next question for you, Jim, is in relation to the covers. So again, I remember being a kid and waiting for that next Beckett hockey to arrive at the card shop every single month. And I just could not wait to see who was on the cover. My question is, who decided who was on the cover of each magazine? Was that yourself or was that the hockey editor? And especially at issue number 1, we know Michael Jordan's on the first issue of basketball. Wayne Gretzky's on the first issue of hockey. I mean, those are obvious selections, but did you make sure it happened that way? And what about subsequent issues?
At the beginning, pretty much all the things I started out, and then I gradually release or delegate. But the two of the things that we guarded closely were the next issue's prices and the next issue's who was going to be on the cover. And I just think the mystique or the surprise or the wondering who was going to be on there was made it fun. So we would always get a bunch of photos. We had top-notch photos that were giving us things to pick from, and so we'd have more than one candidate. And then we, at the last possible moment, and we had same thing with the price guide. The price guide was actually printed on different print so that we could print it last, and the covers were printed separately so we could print them last. And so that I think that was a real positive. It was a real positive because I think people were curious, and we were trying to strike the pulse of what was going on. We had analysts, price guide guys in the East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, and Canada frequently. Not every week in Canada, but we were, again, just to be fair, we were trying not to make it too much a bunch of Americans in Dallas doing hockey. Right. So yeah. So I think the cover was a big deal, and to make it a surprise when you opened it up and then you found out what it was, that was cool. It's kind of like the golden rule. That's what I would have wanted. I would want to be surprised and hopefully delighted, and not ticked off that it was somebody that had no legitimate merit to be selected. Having said that, I'm not sure if your favorite player is Dale Howardchuk. I'm not sure he made the front cover ever.
I don't recall, but Teemu Selanne did, and he's my favorite player.
For sure, yeah.
I want to make sure we have time for one more question.
Go. Is it yours or mine?
Mine.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. We're almost out of time. If it's a tough question, we will be out of time.
So in my opinion, and I've touted you to people I know as, Dr. James Beckett is probably the most iconic person in the hobby. So I'm not just pandering here. I truly believe that you are the most iconic, well-known name in the whole sports card hobby. So my question to you is, aside from yourself, who do you think is the most iconic or well-known legendary name in the sports card hobby?
Well, I'm just going to hurt feelings if I answer that with any one name. What I'm doing in my podcast is I'm trying to do tributes to legends who have gone before, people that I really looked up to and knew. And so those are the ones that have been deceased. What I want to do going forward, and this is a good note to end on because we're kind of out of time here. I want to be interviewing the people that would be candidates for that. I'm close friends with Kit Young. He's an absolute icon. We wouldn't have the really cool trade show. Mike Burkus, who was the father of the national, he passed away, but did a tribute on him. So I'm hoping that I can answer that question for you and others by future episodes. So I appreciate the question, Jeremy. And if listeners have suggestions, I want to get some oral history of the hobby. And I'm blessed to be this is the one good thing about being older is I'm old enough to have known a lot of these people who are iconic and have really helped build an amazing platform. So thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, listeners. Be back again tomorrow with another episode.